Hi, I'm David Kim, park guide at Mammoth Cave National Park. I want to thank you for joining us today. Since we couldn't be together in person, we've put together this digital program on one of the most important parts of Mammoth Cave National Park's history, an era we call the Kentucky Cave Wars. Enjoy. In the early 20th century, an era of competition gripped the Mammoth Cave region. Rival cave owners battled in the courtroom, as well as along the roads, for the tourist dollars passing through Kentucky's cave country en route to the future national park. Yet the Kentucky Cave Wars began a generation earlier, in the 19th century, when cave developers and promoters first began siphoning tourists away from the world-famous Mammoth Cave. At the height of Mammoth Cave's fame in the mid-19th century, the sprawling Mammoth Cave Hotel hosted thousands of guests per year. Staffing and supplying the rural estate spawned communities around Mammoth Cave whose fortunes were bound to the bustling tourism business in south-central Kentucky. In 1838, Stephen Bishop crossed the bottomless pit, unlocking access to the endless passages beyond, and continued to make discoveries deep in the cave for decades. With each discovery, Stephen made headlines, and tourists flocked to see the mysterious new destinations deep in the hills of Kentucky. Matt Bransford and Nick Bransford also became famous guides and explorers. Both worked long careers at the estate, trained generations of new guides and explorers, and, in the case of Matt Bransford, left a family legacy of guiding that has continued decades into the 21st century. Visitors were dazzled by subterranean rivers inhabited by eyeless fish, gypsum-encrusted passages untouched by human hands, waterfalls, deep pits and tall domes, beautiful calcite formations, and more on guided cave expeditions led by famous guides and explorers. Cave fever had gripped southern Kentucky, and there were plenty of opportunities to capitalize on it. One of thousands in Kentucky's cave country, yet unique in its abundance of calcite formations, Diamond Caverns opened for public tours in 1859 and found success as a complement to the long underground journeys tourists experienced in Mammoth Cave. Within a year, 2 more caves opened to tourists. Hundred Domes Cave near Three Forks and Indian Cave along the Mammoth Cave Road from Cave City made for perfect stopovers for vacationers to the area. In 1863, a marketable cave was found on the property of Mammoth Cave lessee Larkin J. Proctor. Soon, the accomplished cave and hotel manager left the Mammoth Cave estate and went into business for himself. Larkin and his brother George Proctor and their many cave and hotel businesses continued to offer direct competition to Mammoth Cave throughout the remainder of the 19th century. Success for these early competitors depended on being located along the stagecoach routes to Mammoth Cave, either from Cave City or Three Forks, the 2 closest towns along the road between Louisville and Nashville. Changes to travel in the 19th century, however, would soon shape the future of the tourism business in south-central Kentucky. The Louisville and Nashville Railroad completed the line between the 2 cities in 1859 and eventually expanded throughout much of the southeastern United States. Stations were built in both Cave City and Three Forks, which was renamed Glasgow Junction for its spur leading to the nearby city of Glasgow. Travel to cave country became quicker and open to a wider segment of the population, and more people made the trip to the world-famous Mammoth Cave. In 1886, a spur was completed between Glasgow Junction and the Mammoth Cave Hotel, called the Mammoth Cave Railroad, and included stops at the communities of Showmont, Union City, and Sloan's Crossing. Stations were also built at Diamond Caverns, Grand Avenue Cave, Proctor Cave and Hotel, and Ganter Hotel, nearly all owned or operated by the Proctor family and built at the behest of Larkin, who held the charter on the rail line. Businesses along the line prospered, and railroad agents sought ways to get more involved in the lucrative business of cave tourism. Grand Avenue Cave, an immense cave similar in proportions to Mammoth Cave, provided railroad agents their first opportunity to own a successful cave when it was purchased from the agent Larkin Proctor in 1891. Railroad agents controlled travel to and from Mammoth Cave and began tightening their grip on the region's booming tourist industry as the century came to a close. Railroad agents further expanded their business interests around Mammoth Cave in the 1890s when Milton Smith of the Louisville and Nashville Railroad took over control of the recently developed Colossal Cavern. Although inconveniently located on Flint Ridge, away from the railroad lines, Colossal Cavern was enormous and widely believed to be a remote section of the extensive Mammoth Cave System. The railroad company feverishly explored the cave, looked for a backdoor entrance to Mammoth Cave, which could have given them total control of tourism in the area. Although a connection was never found, railroad executives advertised and fought to keep their new investment competitive in the Kentucky Cave Wars. But a new century brought a new way to travel to Mammoth Cave: the automobile. Despite poorly maintained dirt roads, automobiles became more and more common on the road from Cave City in the first decades of the 20th century. Travelers no longer depended on railroad agents to help book their vacations. For the first time in a generation, travelers had control over where they went and what they saw in cave country. More mobile and independent tourists provided more opportunities for the people living in and around Mammoth Cave. Adventurous travelers were drawn to new cave businesses, often farther off of the beaten path. Caves were discovered and developed throughout the region in the 1910s. A few, such as Great Onyx Cave, will continue to siphon visitors from Mammoth Cave for nearly another half-century. Despite the many options, Mammoth Cave continued to be the draw to cave country for tourists. 20 years earlier, the L&N Railroad had exhausted itself, looking for a back door to the famous cave. In 1915, George D. Morrison arrived at Mammoth Cave and renewed the search. He quickly proved that the railroad agents had gone about things backwards. They had searched feverishly for a way in from outside. Morrison determined to explore the extensive cave system and find his way out. Against all odds and trespassing laws, Morrison's illegal survey was successful. He succeeded not once but twice, opening the Cox entrance in 1916 and the new entrance to Mammoth Cave in 1921. The new entrance was a smash hit and was developed and opened to the public by spring 1922. After legal challenges to his right to use the land had prevented Morrison from developing the Cox entrance, the Mammoth Cave Development Company obtained the rights to thousands of acres along the Mammoth Cave Ridge. When the new entrance was opened, Morrison's surveys proved that he owned miles of the Mammoth Cave system. His property included the most remote, and therefore pristine, passages in the system, as well as several famous locations discovered and advertised by his new rival, the Mammoth Cave Estate. The Mammoth Cave Hotel, the old entrance as it became known, burned in 1916, opening a window of opportunity for hoteliers around Mammoth Cave. A number of hotels were built to fill the void and accommodate overnight guests, including at cave businesses like Diamond Caverns, Great Onyx Cave, and the new entrance. The old entrance to Mammoth Cave was in decline and struggling to keep up with the increasing competition. George Morrison was not running a stopover on a vacation to the more famous Mammoth Cave. The new entrance was becoming the destination, and Morrison was serving his guests in ways the Mammoth Cave Estate no longer could. In 1923, new entrance guides made a rare discovery under the adjacent property of another cave developer, J.D. Hackett: the frozen Niagara, an area filled with enormous calcite formations, a rarity in the Mammoth Cave system. George Morrison negotiated a way to legally access the natural wonder, while his team got to work finding a way to take tourists there physically. Within a year, they had opened a trail to the frozen Niagara in the cave, as well as blasted an entrance to the surface. Morrison now owned multiple entrances to the Mammoth Cave system and began offering a wide variety of trips, both long and short. The tide had turned, and in 1924, the new entrance to Mammoth Cave was poised to claim victory in the Kentucky Cave Wars. As many as 24 cave businesses were in operation at the height of the Kentucky Cave Wars, and developers struggled to find ways to stand out from the pack. Signs soon lined the highways, intended to direct or even confuse travelers. Names like Mammoth Cave, Mammoth Onyx Cave, Great Onyx Cave, Great Crystal Cave, and Colossal Cavern were often so similar that tourists became confused and wound up at the wrong place. The only way to be sure a traveler got the right information was to speak to them directly. Solicitors, referred to as cave cappers, were hired to staff information booths at rail depots and along the highways throughout the region. Vehicles were approached along the road, and drivers were directed to one cave business or another. Although generally honest, cappers certainly went above exaggeration or confusion to see that a vehicle turned towards their place of business and away from the competition. In the early years of the 20th century, two cave explorers rose to local prominence and shaped the later years of the Kentucky Cave Wars. Floyd Collins and Edmund Turner took advantage of the new opportunities that followed more mobile tourists in cave country. The two spent countless hours exploring the caves around Mammoth Cave and under the Flint Ridge. They became experts on the area's caves and eventually went into business, developing some of their discoveries for the owners of the properties above. After discovering Great Onyx Cave under the property of local preacher L.P. Edwards, Edmund Turner entered into an agreement with Edwards to develop his cave and split the proceeds. However, a personal dispute led to Edwards, the legal owner of the property, to begin telling others a very different story of the cave's discovery, one that cut Edmund Turner out of the story and the business proceeds altogether. Turner fought back, claiming that passages in Great Onyx Cave passed under the properties of Pate Lee and Frank Davis, and convincing the neighbors to sue for proceeds made from tours that passed under their properties. Before the suit could be settled, or a back door blasted into Great Onyx Cave from an adjacent property, Turner fell ill and died of unknown causes. Shortly after the death of his friend and mentor, Floyd Collins also made a startling discovery under Flint Ridge. Great Crystal Cave on the Collins family farm was another enormous, mammoth cave-like system directly under Floyd's feet. The cave was developed and opened to the public soon after its discovery in 1917. Despite the beauty and size of Crystal Cave, it was the farthest cave off of the beaten path, and the Collins family struggled to overcome their cave's distance from the improved road. On January 30th, 1925, Floyd Collins, perhaps the most experienced cave explorer in the Mammoth Cave area, entered Sand Cave, hoping to reverse his family's fortune in the Kentucky Cave Wars. He hoped to find a marketable cave closer to Cave City than even the new entrance and right along the road. The next 18 days would turn the tide in the Kentucky Cave Wars again and set the stage for an end to the terrible competition that gripped cave country. While returning to the surface to report on his discoveries in Sand Cave, Floyd was making his way up a chute on his back when his light was extinguished. He calmly attempted to squirm his way up the chute in the dark when the sound of tumbling rocks filled the passage. Floyd's foot was pinned. Unable to reach over himself in the tight passage, he was forced to wait for help to come to him. The next day, help arrived, and at Floyd's request, sent for his family and friends who had gotten him out of similar binds before. His brother Homer and his friend Johnny Geralds, as well as other guides and explorers throughout cave country, came to Floyd's aid, but struggled to come up with any practical solution to his entrapment. As the days wore on, the word of Floyd's predicament spread to the newspapers and eventually to the radio, a new invention at the time. More and more people around the nation tuned in for developments as the stories became more exaggerated and sometimes even fabricated entirely. More and more people also arrived on the scene at Sand Cave, not to help, but to watch. As many as 10,000 people had descended on the rural cave by what is known as Carnival Sunday, and control over the rescue effort was deteriorating. The National Guard soon took charge and began seeking a shaft to reach Floyd from the other side of the passage. Work was slow. The shaft intersected with the passage that held Floyd Collins on February 17th, 18 days after Collins had gotten stuck. It was too late. Floyd Collins had died, and the entire nation was watching. Floyd Collins, whose entrapment and death helped raise awareness of the National Park project, was not the first cave explorer to die attempting to develop a cave for tours around Mammoth Cave. His death, however, had drawn the attention of the nation. To some, his death was a black eye on the cave business. To others, however, it was just another attraction, something else to see. The entrance to Sand Cave was soon commercialized, as well as the rock that had pinned Floyd Collins. Great Crystal Cave also became successful after Floyd's death. Floyd Collins's remains even became an attraction when his body was placed on display in a glass-topped coffin in the newly renamed Floyd Collins Crystal Cave. The once celebrated Mammoth Cave had become a shadow of its former self. What was once the pride of Kentucky had become infamous for feuding, cutthroat business practices, and solicitors fighting along the roads. Somebody needed to save Mammoth Cave before the beloved natural wonder was destroyed. In 1926, a group organized called the Mammoth Cave National Park Association and traveled to Washington to negotiate with Congress for the establishment of a new national park at Mammoth Cave. The cave and cave area, the group argued, was worthy of federal protection, and in line with a plan to establish national parks in the eastern United States, would help bring the growing National Park Service closer to the nation's centers of population. That same year, the last surviving heir to the Mammoth Cave estate died, and the Mammoth Cave National Park Association purchased the foundation of their new national park. Mammoth Cave National Park was approved, but the hard work of acquiring property was left to the private citizens in the National Park Association. Members began buying up the property around Mammoth Cave as quickly as they could, but soon ran into roadblocks. Many simply refused to sell. Not everyone was willing to abandon their home or livelihood for a new national park. When land sales stalled, the Commonwealth of Kentucky, eager for a new national park, came to the aid of the Mammoth Cave National Park Association. The Kentucky National Parks Commission utilized its power of eminent domain to force the sale of properties and businesses in and around Mammoth Cave. Its greatest success came in 1931, when George Morrison and the Mammoth Cave Development Company sold. Mammoth Cave's greatest competitor, and perhaps the greatest obstacle for peace in the Kentucky Cave Wars, had thrown in the towel. As the park slowly began to take shape, 4 camps of the Civilian Conservation Corps were brought into Mammoth Cave to assist in the creation of the park. For $1 a day, the young men planted millions of trees, removed structures and fencing, built offices and residences, and constructed miles of trails inside the cave. The federal government invested in the staff as well, hiring a new corps of park rangers to lead tours, maintain park grounds and buildings, enforce laws, and a host of other jobs critical to the success of a new national park. On July 1st, 1941, Mammoth Cave National Park was established, the 26th National Park Service unit. The dedication of the new national park took place 5 years later, on September 18th, 1946. Most of Mammoth Cave's competitors had closed their doors by the time the park was established, but there were a few that continued to fight. Even after being engulfed by the national park, diamond caverns continued to solicit along the roads well into the 1960s. But the times had changed. Great Onyx Cave and Floyd Collins Crystal Cave both sold to the National Park Service in 1960 and closed their doors to the public. Once again, caves like diamond caverns were a stopover, something extra for you to do on your trip to Mammoth Cave. Modern cave exploration and mapping in the 1950s began to make some startling revelations about the length of the caves under Flint Ridge, neighboring Mammoth Cave. Connections were found between Floyd Collins Crystal Cave, Great Salts Cave, and Colossal Cavern. Once again, cavers dreamed about connecting to Mammoth Cave. This time, instead of trying to steal their business, cavers were after bragging rights, the title of World's Longest Cave. On September 9th, 1972, history was made when a team of cavers with Cave Research Foundation entered Floyd Collins Crystal Cave and exited via the elevator in the Mammoth Cave System. At 144.4 miles in length, the Flint Mammoth Cave System became the longest mapped cave on Earth. And it was only the beginning. Hundreds of more miles of cave have been mapped since that day. The Cave Research Foundation is still discovering passages and finding connections between cave systems in and around Mammoth Cave, with no end in sight. Floyd Collins, under his family farm on Flint Ridge, was in Mammoth Cave all along. The agents of the L&N Railroad, so desperate to prove that Colossal Cavern connected to Mammoth Cave, were right all along. Even Larkin Proctor, who claimed that Proctor Cave was a distant section of his famous former employer, was right. It's impossible to know how the Kentucky Cave Wars would have turned out if Floyd Collins could have proven that he owned remote stretches of Mammoth Cave years before the opening of the new entrance, or if Larkin Proctor could have made the same claim 50 years before that. President Franklin D. Roosevelt once said, "Competition has been shown to be useful up to a certain point and no further, but cooperation, which is the thing we must strive for today, begins where competition leaves off." Perhaps, by knowing how much damage can be done through competition, we can better appreciate how much we can achieve through cooperation. The Kentucky Cave Wars had a lasting impact on the caves, the land, and the lives of the people that call cave country home. Where once explorers feverishly scrambled to strike it rich by finding, developing, and exploiting a new attraction, today there is quiet. The scars of the past are disappearing, but the people and places in Mammoth Cave National Park will continue to tell the stories of the Kentucky Cave Wars for many generations to come.